Now, yesterday, or Tuesday, we talked about the bank and how Jackson wanted the bank destroyed. Why did he not want a bank? What did he think it did? What does money do to people? It corrupts them. So he thought that the bank corrupted everybody. And he never even really kept his money in the bank anyway. I think he kept it at home. I don't know. But, so, Jackson is going to have a very distinct impact on the presidency. He made a big dent in the pesky Indian removal process. Please do not think I believe that, because I do not. Nullification crisis had passed. What was it replaced with? Remember? When they can't nullify, what are they going to do? What do they do eventually? Secede, right. Good job. The monster bank was destroyed. He made the presidency stronger and expanded the presidential powers. And he used the veto to his benefit, and he was very good with it. He vetoed 12 bills total. So now let's get to Martin Van Buren. In Jackson's second term, Henry Clay organized the Whig Party. And he referred to what this party believed in as the American system. And the purpose behind this was designed to spur national economic development through protective tariff, a national bank, and federal aid for internal improvements. This is a nice theory once again. Now, in 1836, you're going to have an election. Martin Van Buren is going to be the Democratic candidate. There are going to be 4 Whig candidates. Yep. William Henry Harrison, Hugh Lawson White, Daniel Webster, and Willie Pearson Magnum. Of course, Van Buren's going to win. 2 months into Van Buren's presidency, the bottom falls out of the economy, which is not uncommon in a boom-bust cycle. You have a government, but it's not as established as it needs to be. So in 1839, the bottom will fall out of the international cotton market. Who is this going to affect the most? The South, right. The country goes into a very severe depression. But 2 years before this, there was a panic, and people, of course, panicked, and this is what will lead to the depression. Sort of like the Great Depression in the 1930s. In 1840, Van Buren and Congress will create an independent treasury to hold the money for the government. Keep in mind that when they first established the new government, they didn't have this. They had a Secretary of the Treasury, but where did they keep the government money? Whose bank did they keep it in? His last name rhymes with Fiddle. Fiddle, right. I like that name, Fiddle. It's kind of cute. Be a good nickname for a kid. So, it's an independent treasury. Now, the thing about the Treasury, it's not for everybody. It's for the government alone. They can't take any paper money, they can't issue banknotes, and they can't make loans. Their job is to make sure that there's enough specie. What do I mean by that? Gold, silver, to back the money that's in circulation to prevent inflation. What happened with the Continental right after the Revolution? What happened when they put too many in circulation? What were they worth? Nothing. So you don't want this to happen again. The Whig Party are very outspoken about that they want to revive the economy with a very high protective tariff. The idea behind this is to encourage the banking system, to encourage manufacturing within the country and not be dependent on imports from other countries, mainly who? England, right. They're afraid that if we get too involved with them trading, that it could be a repeat of the War of 1812. The Depression will get worse and worse. They compare this to the Great Depression. I've read an article that compares the two, and they were both about as bad, really. Except when you get to the one in the 1930s, you've got electricity and all that stuff. So you have thousands of unemployed. You have businesses going out of, just disappearing overnight. You have banks closing. Wages are going to fall up to 50%. You cut somebody's wages, are they able to pay their bills? Nope. So you're going to have lots and lots of people repossessing things. Like on, the chick with the funky, the one I don't like that has the ponytails and then she wears the black dress all the time.
Operation Repo?
Yeah.
Sonia? I hate her too.
I'm hoping somebody will whip something out and crack in the head with it one of these days. Oh well. Now, the Whigs will eventually get a candidate in office in 1840 when they run William Henry Harrison. Who was his grandfather? Or who was his grandson? Benjamin Harrison, right. And you have Martin Van Buren running again. And they're not going to want to vote for Van Buren because the entire blame for this depression gets laid at his feet. That's like with Herbert Hoover in the Great Depression. They blame him, and in every aspect they can blame him. Because he sat on his hands while the country went to, where in a handbasket. So Harrison was hailed as a man of the people. Imagine that, what a concept. Van Buren, on the other hand, was portrayed as a dandy. Now, a dandy would belong to the Macaroni Club. Remember we talked about the Macaroni Club? So a dandy would belong to that club. So he wore a corset. This is not uncommon for men back then, though. They wore corsets. They did, really. He ate off of gold plates with silver spoons. And, here's a bad one. He chose not to stink like the rest of the world, and he wore cologne. The audacity of that man to not want to stink, I'm telling you.
What's corset, Tammy?
Huh?
What does corset mean?
A corset is it's like a lingerie garment, and it's got bone in it, and you cinch it really tight, and it holds you in, and you walk around like this. You can't breathe.
I always heard that people died because they were tied too tight.
Well, interesting you should mention that. Women would wear their corsets so tight that it would squeeze out their internal organs.
Ooh. Oh my gosh.
That's not real.
And break their ribs.
But they say that they weren't bad for them.
Exactly.
Anything you read, they say they weren't bad. They were weird.
Well, I will tell you, they do kind of help your back.
Because I have one.
And I wear it when my back's really bothering me.
You
And
don't squeeze it because that's your...
no, I don't. I'm not walking around.
I think that's part of it.
It fits me. It's tight enough to support the back, and that's all I need. If I wanted to look like that, I would, put Saran wrap around me and shrink wrap it or something. But yeah, they wore corsets. Men wore corsets. Women wore corsets. There's an episode of CSI Vegas where they find this guy without a head and he's wearing a corset. He's a Civil War reenactor. That's weird. I don't know. The Whigs would appeal more to their everyday people. They loved their hard cider, and they all lived in a log cabin. Never mind that it was probably bigger than, I don't know, 3 of these rooms put together. William Henry Harrison, who was the Whig candidate, was born into an aristocratic family. Wait a minute. I thought these guys were for the little fellas. Interesting. He lived in a 16-room mansion in Ohio. Doesn't sound very poor to me. The Whigs are going to tap a source that nobody has thought to tap. They're going to involve women in their political campaigns. Here is your next bonus question. There was a woman elected to the House of Representatives before women were allowed to vote. Bring me her name.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
There was a woman that was elected to the House of Representatives, and it was in, I'm thinking the 1840s, somewhere along there, before women could even vote. Bring me her name. So the women are going to be very active in the Whig campaign tours and things like that. They're going to go to rallies. Ladies, I hate to betray us, but what happens when you get a whole bunch of women together for a cause?
Fighting.
Well, yeah, but are they very vocal about it? Yeah, and finally they're getting to be heard, so it's going to be twice as loud. So yeah, they're going to hold meetings in towns and invite people to these meetings and, you know, talk up their candidate or whatever. They're going to make speeches. You know, there's a thing, women are to be seen and not heard, just like children during this time. But the Whigs say, hey, you know what? If you have something to say and you can say it pretty intelligently, well, let's hear it. So the Whigs are going to embrace the women. And they're going to be responsible for writing most of the campaign pamphlets. They will do this. They will, a lot of the times, they'll get paid for this. So with this election, it has a record turnout. 4 out of 5 registered voters would vote. Does anybody know the numbers on how many people voted in this last election for the president? It was one of the highest turnouts in like 20 years. 30 years, something like that. That's because we had, you know, an African American and a woman running. So Harrison's going to win the election with 150,000 popular votes and basically sweep the Electoral College. The Democratic ideology or the thinking with the Democrats, first they're going to see society as a conflict between the people, the normal people, and the greedy aristocrat. So they're anti-aristocrat. But they're for the, you know, but the Whigs are for the common guy too. So they're the ideologies. They like a paper money They believe that the paper money aristocracy manipulates the bank for its own gain. Who doesn't? Okay. They sap the nation by encouraging speculation. They distrust the bank. They embrace simplicity, frugality, independence, and hard work. They want a strong market without the farmer suffering, and they want a less complicated market system. Why would they want a less complicated market system? Are most farmers literate and accountants and lawyers and stuff? No, so they want it so that they can understand it a lot easier. And to be honest, I've got 11 years of higher education, and I don't understand the economic stuff. So imagine what these poor schlubs back then were going through. The Democrats want limited government. They think the government's role is to promote competition between businesses. They destroy monopolies and any kind of special privilege. Here's a tip for you. The Democrats were one of the biggest people to buy into the spoils system. They reject the idea that moral beliefs need to be monitored by the government. Anybody ever read 1984? Is that kind of what they're doing? Yeah, so they don't want Big Brother. They believe that religion and politics need to be separate. Separation of church and state. I wholeheartedly believe this. And at one point, it was illegal for anybody who was an active minister to be in political office. We should go back to that. We don't need Jesse Jackson up there. We don't need, who else up there's a reverend? Al Sharpton, yeah, so yeah. And they oppose any kind of humanitarian legislation. They think people should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The Whigs have their own ideology. They're more comfortable with the market. They think that commerce and economic development are agents of civilization. Is that somewhat true? I mean, if you don't have the commerce and economic development, we'd all still be living in villages hitting men over the head, dragging them back to our caves. Guess I flipped that on purpose. And they think it's the government's responsibility to provide a well-regulated economy and guarantee opportunities for citizens of ability. Did that say every citizen? No, citizens of ability. And they believe that you have to have banks and you have to have corporations. They are a necessary evil. They think that the government is supposed to protect the rights of individuals and public liberty. Is that true? I told you about Locke, and he said, in order for the government to protect us and for us to give up some of our natural rights to them, it's their job to make sure that we're safe and to protect our liberty. They want to regulate the economy and competition. If the government does this, then everybody has equal opportunity. They want the general welfare promoted beyond the economy. It doesn't matter if we got a lot of money, as long as our people are healthy and have what they need. They believe that the government should be used to monitor moral welfare, how people are being treated, things like that. They favor temperance, which is what? None of this.
Prohibition of alcohol.
No consumption of alcohol, right? They're very anti-slavery and they're very pro-education. Let's see this. That last slide wasn't really that important. Any questions on chapter 11? That's one of the long chapters. Things a little more interesting. In the 1830s and the 1840s, there's a huge migration that's not of wildebeests or carpenter ants or anything like that. It's the Sioux Indians are on the move. They're also they're mingling with other natives, but they're trying to impose their will upon them, so you're going to have some trouble. Back when the Spanish showed up, they brought some animals with them, mainly horses. And by now the Native Americans were expert horseback riders. They brought cows, pigs, and sheep. All these came in from Europe. What's the problem with sheep and grazing land?
They eat all the grass.
They eat everything, right? I mean, they would eat right down to the very dirt. You ever see that cartoon where, I think it's Bugs Bunny, he's got his sheep lined up and they're munching across Yosemite Sam's cattle ranch, and when you see the sheep go, it's just dirt behind where they've been. It's something similar to that. So yeah, sheep are bad on grasslands. The Sioux had embraced three things brought over by the Europeans: the horse, the gun, and disease. Now, the Sioux have realized a way to keep from getting all these diseases. They're pretty much mobile. After the savages were civilized, they became sedentary. They stayed and farmed, which made them susceptible to diseases. The Sioux are going to get around this by being mobile. Disease is going to throw the balance of power to the Sioux Indians. Smallpox will hurt the settled natives. Smallpox still a problem in the world today?
You won't get the vaccination.
In the world, yeah. In the U.S., no. Africa has probably the highest instances of smallpox. They also have the highest instances of AIDS.
AIDS? You say AIDS?
Mm-hmm. You know why? Well, that's part of it. Have I ever told you about infibulation? Would you like to know about it?
Is that like they call them